Hey guys, it's Glenn from glenscarcollection.com, and today we're going to be answering your questions. So I did a Ask Me a Question video, and we had a lot of really good questions. So at first I thought I would just pick the best 3 questions, but we got so many good ones, I'm going to run through a bunch of them now. So if we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. Leave a comment below with your question again. Some of you asked multiple questions, so to make it fair, I'm only going to pick one of your questions. Every time we do a question and answer video, just ask one question, save the next one for the next time. And if you're seeing this for the first time or didn't get a chance to ask a question last time, a car question, leave it in the comments below at the end of this video, and then the next question and answer, I'll answer those questions, so we'll keep the cycle going. So let me see here. Forgive me if I butcher anybody's name or YouTube handle. All right, so Robert Baez says, is there any car brands that you would never buy? I don't think there is any. Like, I'm looking forward to driving the Kia Stinger. I didn't get to drive that. Probably before the Stinger, I wouldn't have considered maybe that brand, possibly, because it seemed like a cheaper brand. And in my experience, I got it once getting one of my BMW service at the dealer. I don't remember if it was the M2 or the 1M. They were out of BMW loaner cars, so they just gave me whatever Hertz or Enterprise had, and it was a Kia. And it was a sharp-looking car from the outside, but on the inside it was the exact opposite. It was hard plastic and it drove like garbage. So even though I think Kia makes good-looking cars, probably I would have said I wouldn't have bought it, or Daewoo or something like that. But now that I've driven so many cars, I think you really have to drive them to appreciate them. So at some point, hopefully I'll drive the Kia Stinger, and then who knows, maybe I'll love Kias. But I would say hopefully the answer is no. I don't think, I hope I'm not a car snob where I would try, every single car. So I don't think, like say Daewoo, I don't know that they have any cars that I'd be interested in. Just using Kia as an example, I would be interested in the Kia Stinger. All right, so let's see what else we got. If I could only keep one car, what car would it be? Well, if I was down to one car or only could have one sports car, let's just say you need a regular daily driver to get back and forth from work, do family stuff, and then you can have one weekend sports car. If I could only have one car, I think I would go NSX. Like if I had to liquidate my car collection and I had to keep one car, I think it would be the NSX. I just love NSXs. I always bought something else instead of the NSX, and I think I mentioned this in previous videos. Love mid-engine cars. Back in 2012, I think it was, I kept going back and forth between getting a Cayman S and an NSX. And I actually chose the Cayman S because I just thought it was a newer car. Instead of what I could afford, I wanted a Targa NSX because it was just going to be, a third, fourth car, fifth car at that time. So I wanted the Targa top. And so the Targas didn't start till 95 here in the United States. So my thing was, 06, 07 Cayman S, which is the first gen, versus 95 NSX. And I thought if I put a lot of miles on this car, and I did drive the Cayman a lot, probably 10,000 miles a year, that, for fourth car or whatever it was, fifth car, I just thought it'd be a modern car, 12 years newer, so I can take it back and forth to work. And even, I think one winter, I didn't drive it when salt was on the road, but I got a pair of winter tires, and I even drove it one winter when the weather was decent, as long as there was no salt on the road, and drove great. And I took it to hockey all the time because between the two trunks, I can actually fit the majority of the hockey bag in the front trunk, and then I took my skates and helmet out and put it in the back trunk and the stick in the middle. And I took it to hockey probably every time I played hockey, so that's probably why I put so many miles on it. So that's why I chose that for the NSX. And then I got a Lotus Exige. I don't remember if I got that before the NSX or not. And then when I finally got an NSX, because every time I saw an NSX, I'm like, wow, I got to have one of those cars. Oh my God. I had all these car magazines I collected over the years from NSX. I had all these magazines from when I was a kid. I had every issue like since the 90s, so I had all these NSX issues and books on the NSX. And every time I saw one, which you didn't see one that often, I was like, oh my God, an NSX. So I finally broke down and got one. I had, believe it or not, I had an SRT8 Cherokee that I was looking to sell. Instead of getting another practical daily driver, I bought an NSX. And once I bought that 95 NSX, which I purchased in 2012 and had 4 or 5 years, that was probably one of the best, smartest decisions I ever made. That car doubled in value. I sold it for double, 4 years later, and put a lot of miles on it. And once I drove it, I was like, oh, I'm so stupid. I should have bought an NSX 5 years ago. You know, in 2009, when the economy was terrible, you can get a phenomenal NSX for 20, 25 grand. And, you know, that same car today is in the 50s. So definitely, if I had one car left, it would be the NSX. I love all the cars. I'd miss them, but I don't think I want to be without an NSX. Hockey player asks, what made you interested in cars? I was born interested in cars. I can't really point to a time or a place that, like, I didn't see a car driving by and say, ooh, what's that? I'm into cars. Or a lot of people discovered cars maybe when they're a teenager or in their 20s or in high school. I was born into cars. I mean, my earliest memories of a kid was just dreaming about cars. I used to have like pedal cars, and don't do this at home, kids, but I used to try to find like steep driveways and steep sidewalks so I can go full speed down there. I was always like an adrenaline junkie. And at my grandmother's house, she had one of these like little motorized kids cars, you know, for a 3-4-year-old. And it probably went not even 1 mile an hour, and it never worked. She usually had to push it with her foot. So I found a way. She had a steep driveway, and it was a quiet street. It was, you know, a cul-de-sac, so there's no cars coming. I just hit the camera there, sorry. And I would go full speed down that driveway, and then I'd have to spin out at the end because the brakes weren't capable, and that would actually stop me. I'd spin out and slide into the grass, and luckily it was so low to the ground, and I was, you know, a 3-year-old didn't know what he was doing. Luckily I didn't fall over and hit my head on the driveway, but I did that all the time. So it's just kind of a speed freak, and always loved watching racing on TV. That was just fascinating to me. So when I was a little kid, you know, my dream car was probably a Ferrari. I thought if I was, became a hockey player one day or a Major League Baseball player, that's what I would get, a Ferrari. So, and that was always more important to me than having a house or anything like that. Remember what we used to say when I used to do a lot of track events? We used to say, and I was a track instructor for a local group here, and what we used to say is, you can sleep in your car, but you can't race your house. So if you have a choice, you get the car, not the house. But obviously, probably most people don't feel that way, especially families. I can't pronounce your name. Ratesy asks, every new sports car generally has too hard of a suspension and low ground clearance. Also, tire thickness is really low. So he's talking about the low profile tires. And do I think that'll end? And he's enjoying his 2013 GT. I assume that means Mustang GT. And it's got great ground clearance. Absolutely. I did a review of 2013 Mustang GT convertible. I loved it. It had a Roush Racing exhaust, and it was fantastic. Definitely a great car for the money. Yeah, and the tire does have profile on those cars. Enough of a profile you don't have to worry about, you know, getting bumps in the tire or you know, getting flat tires every time you hit a pothole. So that's a great idea. Yeah, like I'll tell you, for example, I'm looking for a daily driver, and the M5 has a decent enough sidewall. And, you know, if I have to go to New York City or the Cross Bronx Expressway, for those of you local know what I mean, like those lanes aren't even. The potholes are massive in New York City. So I take my wife's Jeep Cherokee because it's got a very high sidewall. And especially when it's raining, when you can't tell how deep the potholes are. And, you know, that's probably saved me a million times. If I had my Mercedes or BMW, I'd probably have, you know, 10-pin wheels. And that's like the RS7 would be a great car. I don't know if it's probably too much of a sports car to be a daily driver and drive clients around. But the RS7, the profile is so little, I think I get a flat tire every day, even going to my job in New Jersey. So that's why I kind of like the S8. It's got a higher profile. And I think the M5 does too. All right, next question by Scott Winton. What do you think of the M240? For people who like the M2 but wanted a convertible. I drove the M240 on the track, and it was great. The difference between that and the M2 is going to be brakes, but I'm assuming since you have a convertible, you're probably not doing track events, because I know in New Jersey, if you had a convertible, you have to have a roll bar, you have to have the broomstick test. At least it used to be that way when I tracked cars. You had to have your roll bar above your head. So now all the cars have, you know, things that pop up in case there's a rollover. But I'm going to assume for a convertible, you're not going to be tracking it. So yeah, I think that's a great choice. An M240, I think that's a real nimble car, the 240. Where it fails, like I said earlier, is it doesn't have the braking power of the M2. But yeah, I mean, if you're just using it on the street, I think that would be great. You can even get it in a stick shift, and it would be a great convertible to have. It would be put a nice exhaust on it or something. And definitely, M2 doesn't come in convertible. If you want a convertible, definitely go for it, Scott. All right, my friend Greg DeSantis, would you ever buy a car from an app like Carvana? So you've seen all the commercials, they have like, instead, it almost looks like a candy dispenser, like the car dealership. They have all the cars lined up. You pick your car, you press a button, it comes down. They deliver it to you. They take care of everything. They'll even trailer take your trade with you, make it an easy car buying experience. You've probably seen the commercial. And if Carvana wants to sponsor me, if you give me a check, I'll gladly cash it. But yeah, I would consider, what I don't like about the ads, like look at Cars.com or Auto Trader. They'll say there's an Audi S8 on there, for example, and they'll have like 20, I guess people search locally. Like I searched nationally. The S8, they didn't make too many of them, so I got to search the country, and still maybe only 20 come up in my price range in the years that I'm looking. If you just did 30 miles or 50 miles from your house, you might have 0. You might have 1. So I think what they do is they advertise every region, probably based on population. So if you do a national search, the same Carvana Audi S8 comes up 20 times, 15 times. And it's the same for any car that they have. If you're looking for whatever, a 911, a Chevy, Toyota, whatever. And what I don't like is, say they have 20 pictures there, only a handful of pictures of the car. Everything else is about the Carvana buying experience. And you can't even tell what options are on the car. Like I'll do videos of what I look for cars. But when I contact a dealer, if it's sight unseen, I'll look at the pictures and I'll be like, what's the measurements on the tires? What's the tire date code? How much brake do we have left? And maybe they would answer that, Carvana, but none of that is in the pictures, or doesn't say any of that. Like it doesn't say the options of the car. Like for the Audi S8, I'm looking for specific options, and that Carvana car doesn't have it. Looking at the pictures, I've seen enough S8s, I can tell some of the options from the pictures. The same with like the M5, because I'm considering that car too. Or the Porsche Panamera, I can tell the options. But like, they're not telling you anything about the car. If you saw a listing from Audi, or even any kind of dealerships that's selling that Audi or BMW, they'll list all the options. Original MSRP this, these are the 5 options it has, blah, blah, blah. Carvana doesn't do any of that. So yes, if that Audi had the mileage and they can answer all my questions that I would have, make sure that car comes with 2 keys and the owner's manual, then yeah, I would consider it, sure, why not? But I just think their advertising leaves a little, I think they're more like selling the experience than the actual car. And probably 90% of the people that are buying those cars could care less about the option it has and all the other stuff. They probably just care. They don't want to do the hassle going to a car dealership and wasting 3 or 4 hours haggling over a car. They can do it online with Carvana. So that's probably why they're not really selling to a purist like me or enthusiast like us. They're selling to the masses. They're going to go broke if they're waiting for an enthusiast to buy a car. So that's probably why they do it that way, of course. Healthy New You Recipes asks, Money Note Object, which car would you absolutely want in your collection? Wow, Money Note Object. Well, the best car I ever drove, and not counting, I don't know if he or she is asking about a collectible car. So I'm going to give you probably 2 different answers. If I didn't care, best car I ever drove, Money No Object, I won Powerball tomorrow. I would buy the McLaren 720S. I think that's the best car I've ever driven in my life. Now, that's if I don't care about resale value, reliability, all that other stuff. And that's that's the reason I don't have one. So if I'm looking for a collectible car, like a car that I think will be collectible and appreciate in value, or at least hold its value, I would probably, that's a much tougher question. Wow. I would think, if I could afford something like the new GT2 RS, obviously, but realistically, that I think the car that's stood the test of time, that I could keep, and it'll, any car, even if the car goes up most of the time, a lot of car collecting has to do with the economy. The economy tanks. Collector cars are going to go down too because people don't have discretionary income. So I'm just saying, like a good stock, it goes up more than it goes down. And for collectability, I would probably say the Ford GT, and which is the 2005, 2006 Ford GT. The new one is the hot car now, and who knows, may sell for $1 million, but I think a safe bet is a Ford GT. I'd consider a Carrera GT, I think would be a cool car too. I think that'll be $1 million car one day. What else? I'd love to have a Pagani or something like that. I don't know about collectability. I don't know. With the rarity, they can always come out new models that are better and more improved. So I would probably say probably Ford GT. All right, next question. All right, Bobby Krepek here. He had 1 million questions, so I'm going to actually, which I thank you, Bobby, but what I think I'm going to do is answer what I think is Well, one of your questions, and I think this is a good one, would you rather spend money on a brand name exhaust or get a cheaper custom exhaust? I would probably do a brand name exhaust. I used to always put it, and this is, I think, another person asked this question. Before I had cars that were like collectible, that typically go up in value every year, not every year, but typically go up more than they go down. Now I try to keep those cars stock, because if you go to sell a car, you got to put the car back to stock. Even like a 1M or 993 Turbo, you're not going to be able to sell that with modifications. If you do, you're going to get a lot less. You'd have to get all the stock parts. And so for that reason, I don't really modify my cars except for exhausts. I put an exhaust on the 1M. I kept the stock exhaust. The M Coupe came with an exhaust on it. The NSX, I took the exhaust off my 2012 NSX, put the stock one on when I sold it. I'm sorry, my 1995 NSX that I bought in 2012. I put an exhaust on that. When I sold it a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I put the stock exhaust back on it. I put that aftermarket Pride exhaust on my 2005 NSX, and I kept the stock exhaust, so if I ever sold that car, I can sell it with the stock exhaust. I would go with the name brand exhaust, and the reason I would do that is drone. The biggest thing that can ruin your driving experience, though it may sound great around town, is if you have to do some long highway drives and you're in 6th gear and you get terrible drone. So if you go with a name brand, there's typically less drone. So typically, if all the exhausts are the same, and I would go with a Borla exhaust, that's what I usually go with. I just think that has the best sound, the best overall average. It's a good price. It's a good exhaust. It sounds good, and it's got less drone. So typically, I would do that over a custom exhaust. And you can get used exhaust. If there's an exhaust you want, keep searching the forums. A lot of times, are back to stock to sell it. They'll sell the exhaust, and you can get it usually for 50 cents on the dollar. So that's what I would do. If you're fine and it's just a weekend car and you think a custom exhaust is a lot cheaper, then go for it. But it could be a drone problem. All right. Own 3D for you says, what is the most expensive car you've owned, and would you consider selling multiple cars to purchase an exotic? I think of that second part of the question every single day. I'm constantly searching exotics, thinking, well, if I sold 3 or 4 cars, I can get that exotic. Well, let's answer, I guess, the first part of the question first. Most expensive car I've ever bought is the 993 Turbo, and I bought it cheap. So that car was, I bought for like 70 grand, and now it's probably worth, 150 or a little less than that, 130, somewhere in that range. And the 05 NSX, was up there as well, and that's an 05 NSXs sell usually for over 100 now. So those are the most expensive cars I've bought. Typically, I like cars that are around 50,000. Because I think 50,000, the depreciation is gone. If it was an expensive car, the next depreciation is going to be slower. And I think I always try to buy the next car that's going to go up in value. So I bought the 993 Turbo, and I'll do a video on this. I just filmed some stuff with it yesterday. I bought it because it was a great driving experience. I just thought that car was so much more than a $70,000 experience. Those cars were over 100 new. To me, that was a $200,000 experience. I've driven, Ferraris, I've driven McLarens, I've driven Lamborghinis, and I think the 993 Turbo is just as good as all those cars. And guess what? It comes in a stick shift, and they don't make them anymore. There'll always be a better McLaren, a better Ferrari, a better Lamborghini, but there's never going to be a better air-cooled turbo. So that's why I bought the car. I couldn't believe how much car you got for the money, and literally a couple months after I bought it, I was offered, $150,000 to trade it in at a Porsche dealer. So it's like, I don't want to say I'm a genius, and I didn't predict that at all. But I saw the prices were going from like 70 to 90, and my budget was 70. I sold the Cayman S, and I sold my Exige S, and that gave me the money, 70, 80,000, something like that. And I said, I'm going to buy a 93 Turbo now, because I think in a month they're going to be 90 grand, because all the new ones coming online were 90, and then they went to 150, 200, all those things. So that was the most expensive car I've ever owned. And would I consider multiple cars to purchase an exotic? I would. The problem is, I don't think there's an exotic car that'll hold its value. So like stick shift Ferraris already went up. So if a couple years ago I bought a stick shift Ferrari, I probably would have doubled my money, and that would have been the smartest investment. But I didn't predict that, and nobody did. And they went up so fast. So the problem is, let's say I packaged 3 or 4 cars, and that gave me a 570S or a Huracan or a 458 Spider. That would be great, but those cars are going to depreciate, so my cars will probably be going up. Even if they're going up 3% a year or 5% a year, they're going up. And that pays for all my expenses, and I'll do another video on that. So they're essentially like free cars, and I use that term loosely, but if it goes up, if it costs you $1,000 to maintain a car a year and another $800 to insure it, if the car goes up $3,000 a year, you're in the money. You're putting out those expenses now, but when you cash out in the future, you'll get all that money back, and that's what I look for, and that's why I have multiple cars. If I had the S2000 is sold about a month ago, so I have 7 cars. If they all depreciated 10 grand a year, that'd be a $70,000 loss every year. I'd be broke really fast. So I try to buy cars that hold their value, so I know when I sell it, I recoup all my expenses. And typically, those cars I think are all, like, it's impossible to find a good 1M. It's impossible to find a blue 05 NSX. It's impossible to find a 993 Turbo. It's impossible to find an S54M Coupe. So it wouldn't make sense to sell those cars because I would wind up getting a higher mileage car in worse condition once I add sales tax for the same price. So I might as well keep my cars that are keep appreciating, or at least have the potential to do that. So that's why I want to do it. So let's just say all my cars went up $10,000 a year total. Let's just say that's realistic, $2,000 or $3,000 a year times each car. So maybe $15,000 a year, maybe on a good year, $20,000 a year net worth wise. Whatever exotic car I buy for $200,000 is going to go down $50,000 a year or $30,000 a year. And not only that, the servicing. Like my cars, I can do oil changes myself. You get a new set of tires every 5 years, and then the stuff is minimal because unfortunately I have so many cars. The most I can drive them a year is 1,000 miles, and 1,000 miles is not going to be much maintenance, and I do all the preventive maintenance, all that other stuff. So it's really not expensive to own that many cars if you buy them right and buy cars that hold their value. The problem is if I bought that Ferrari 458, I could spend 10, 20 grand in servicing every year, and it depreciates 20 or 30 grand a year. So now I'm in the hole 50 grand, or keep it 3 or 4 years, it costs me $100,000. If I kept my cars, they're going to go up, $30,000, $40,000 in that same time period. Now it's a $150,000 swing. It doesn't make sense. If I could find, a car where I could sell 3 or 4 cars, and this car is just collectible, and I can drive it and fits, what I'm looking for with like a stick shift and potential to go up in value. The problem is, like, say you do like GT3 RS. Porsche's going to keep building those GT3 RSs, or the GT3s, the 997 GT3s were going way up in value over the last 5 years because they were stick shift cars, and the new 991s were PDKs. And then, Porsche saw that. They're a business. They started to make the new 991.2 GT3 available in a stick shift. And what did that do? That devalues the 997s now, because you can just walk into the dealer and get a 991.2 GT3 in stick. Same thing, I always liked the Aston Martin V12 Vantage, which was available in 2011, 2012. I've said this on the podcast and stuff, that I thought that was a great collectible car because it's a V12 stick, and I've driven it. It's way different than a V8 Vantage. It's 100 times better. That V12 is a beast. It's almost, I'll call it like a British Viper. That's how visceral that car is. And they were going up. They were, $120,000, $130,000 cars, and they were going up to like $160,000 because they were the stick shifts. Not the Vantage S that was, the auto single clutch transmission, which was horrible. So the stick shifts were going way up in value. So what did they do? The last year of the Vantage, before the new model comes out, the new Vantage that's coming out now, they made the 2017s available in stick, and that just killed the market on the 11s and 12s. So even if you bought that in an investment and Aston Martin swore that's the last stick shift they're ever going to make, 5, 6 years later they came out with a stick, and those cars now are like, they dropped from 160 to 130 to 100. One just sold at Bring a Trailer for like 90. So imagine buying that as an investment at 150 and goes down to 90. So what I like about my cars is there'll never be another 1M. I know for sure. There'll never be an S54M Coupe again. There'll never be an air-cooled 993 Turbo again. There'll never be an original NSX again. So those are safe bets to me. I would love to do it. It's very tempting to sell a bunch of cars and get a 570S, and I inquire all the time the McLaren dealers, how much could I get this car for? And they're probably tired of me wasting their time, but I dream about that every day. I'll probably check as soon as this video is over. All right, I think that's all the questions. If I missed your question, I'm sorry. Leave your question again below, and we'll have another question and answer video maybe the next coming week. So if you see this video, leave your question for next time, and I'll answer a bunch of questions next time. So thanks again for watching. Remember, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, like and share the video. That helps my channel grow. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.